share both challenges and successes in unlocking the potential of neglected and underutilized species for our food systems, all with the aim of achieving the SDGs. And with the angle of how we have a more sustainable planet, how we can bring food and nutrition security, how we can have systems that are more inclusive of the farmers, of the women, of the youth, of the more marginalized people, but importantly, how we can do this in unison and not just in silos. There'll be a very large focus on the policy and research needed to make this happen. Now, you will also hear throughout today a number of terms being used in neglected and underutilized species, forgotten foods, smart foods, opportunity crops, but each speaker will use their own term, but we really mean the same sort of group of crops that really are have been underutilized and less represented without the policy support, without the amount of research. And now this webinar was also based on the launch of a new publication and review undertaken by the European Commission, which is called Neglected and Underutilized Potential for Food and Nutrition Security, a knowledge review. So we'll hear a lot of insights about this today as well. So with no further ado, I would like to welcome our very first eminent speaker, François Kayitakire, who's with the European Commission. He's head of Unit D5, which is on food security for the European Commission, the Joint Research Centre. So François, over to you for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Joanna. And I would like, first of all, to welcome all the participants. And it's a great pleasure to have you all attending this seminar. As Joanna said, we have a large number of participants and registered, which shows the interest in this topic. I would like also to thank, first of all, the panelists who accepted to come and to share their insights into this topic, and also especially also to thank our colleagues from different services of the Commission. This seminar is about neglected and underutilized species, especially some crops, but it's also a way to share what we consider as the state of the art and the knowledge in terms of how these species are utilized today, what is missing to develop to make sure that they are more utilized, but also to give data and the information to policy DGs to act on to promote those species, because we consider those crops as essential elements for resilient food systems, as elements to promote more diversity in terms of dietary diversity, but also diversity of crops across the world. This knowledge review has been conducted by the Joint Research Centre, which is the scientific service of the European Commission. But it has been done also in close collaboration with other DG, including the Directorate General for International Partnership, which is now called DG INPA, but also with the European Commission Humanitarian Office, DG ECHO. And there are also other services that are interested in this review for their policies, especially DG Agri, DG Clima, and DG Sante, for the obvious reasons that those crops will contribute to better nutrition, but also they are very often more adapted to extreme events, adapted to climate, adapted for the climate adaptation measures, but also there are needs for developing further research in those fields. As Joanna said, there are several terms, but also the definitions in terms of what we call neglected and underutilized species in crops. What one element that actually we should take into account is those are crops that have been seen their importance over time declining, they are tend to lose ground against few dominant crops at the global level. For instance, we take for the example of millet. Millet that has been cultivated for millennia across Africa and Asia. In the 60s, millet was the harvest area of millet was representing almost 10% if you consider the main cereals, rice, wheat, and maize. But today, this 10% has been reduced to 5%. Whereas this has been reduced to 5%, whereas at the same time, the population is growing in those areas where the millet was consumed. It means that there is a shift in terms of consumption. There is also a shift in terms of global trade. Those crops are tended to be neglected in the global trade, whereas they provide essential elements, nutritional elements, but at the same time, so they provide essential income to communities that are producing them. There are issues in terms of research, in terms of marketing. Those crops are tend to be replaced because crops that are more marketed. So that's why this discussion, this debate is essential, is important to guide future actions, not only to protect those crops in terms of crop diversity, but also to promote those crops, because in the future, we believe that there will be the essential elements for sustainable and resilient food systems. So this debate today, we'll see probably some controversial issues in terms of what we have, but we like also to have this debate open so that we can all together progress and make use and also help the design of policy programs that will effectively respond to the promoting those crops. So I would like to now, this is what my colleagues will be sharing now. And I would like to thank again my colleagues who are going to share this, but also the colleagues who have collaborated with us, our partners, mainly GFAiR, and we look forward to the debate. We will be also happy to have your feedback in terms of what we can do next in terms of research, because we are here to advance the science. So thank you everyone again, and welcome to this seminar, and I wish you productive discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, François, for a good overview of the multiple benefits and challenges. And thank you for mentioning millets. I'm sure I'm the only person in Australia who eats millets daily. I'm converted. Okay, so that was excellent. So we'll go to our next speaker now, who'll give more background information. So Dana Leroy, who's also from the European Commission, Program Assistant in the Directorate General for the European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid Operations. So Dana, over to you.
Thank you very much. I would like to be very brief, so we would like the ones who know speaking more and better. What I would like just to add to the future discussion, which will be more about the how, I would like to present to you the why, the element that triggered all this, Cinderella type adventure, trying to dig up, the hidden beauty of the underutilized crop. I don't know how many of you are aware how big the drama of children dying from severe wasting is. WHO issued a report, and in 2024, there were 12.2 million children dying from severe acute malnutrition all over the world. We see that the relapse rate, it's higher and higher. We also notice that due to the climate change, all the disasters that basically ECHO was more or less, how shall I say, accustomed to deal with, are becoming more and more difficult to respond to and to contain. The droughts are longer, the floods are coming in unexpected periods of time, the crops are destroyed, the coping mechanism of people already in humanitarian settings or in very dire situations, vulnerable ones, are, dismantled. So basically something had to be done. On top of it, we all made commitments in order to make our response, whenever possible, more greener, to reduce the carbon footprint. So all this being said, and to show that, the Commission is still believing in the fact that something is possible, beginning of the year in March, at the Nutrition for Growth Summit, we pledged together with INPA for 3.4 billion euros to be spent until 2027, out of which 1.6 billion euro are going to be for emergency humanitarian response. So once we have this background, we started to think, okay, so what can be done? What can really be the value added of the European institutions, of the commissions, of our partners? And then, in ECHO, we are basically skilled in doing the emergency response, but we realized we can't do it alone. And together with the colleagues in INPA, we also realized that now what is very important is to find good ideas. And that's when we turned to our scientific colleagues in GRC and said, let's do something that allows us to be more sustainable, how shall I say, be closer. Let's put it differently. Let's be better in walking the walk while talking the talk. So this is how we started this Cinderella adventure, how I used to call it at some point. And I'm very, very happy that, looking at how many of you are present today, it triggered interest, and I think it's not going to be for nothing. So thank you very, very much for all your support in the past, in the present, and hopefully in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. And that's a really important message, and you've set the scene well to remember that this is a really serious topic. This is about humanitarian issues, climate crises that are happening, and really actions are going to impact people's lives. So it's so important. So thank you for setting that scene, Dana. So we'll go to the next speaker, Christophe Larose, who's with the European Commission as team leader for the Directorate General for International Partnership. Over to you, Christophe.
Thank you, Joanna, and good morning, everybody, and a pleasure to be with such a large crowd today. I'm afraid I will repeat a few things, but knowledge is also about repetition of important issues. So what I wanted to say about why NUS agenda matter to us is first, I would say, figures speak for themselves. We know there are about 50,000 edible plants in the world. A few hundreds are contributing significantly to the food supply. 15 crops are making 90% of our energy intake, and 3 crops, maize, rice, and wheat, are making about half of our energy intakes. So looking at that, of course, we see that the concentration of food supply and food baskets on a few plants or crops have, of course, contributed to address and tackle hunger in the world, though not fully, but not clearly and not decisively the quality and the healthy diet aspect. So for us, dealing with the NUS agenda is obviously a response to the food security and nutrition agenda. Second point is that, as we already said, but the NUS are by essence adapted to local contexts, and many of them are very adapted to very harsh environmental contexts. So working more on this kind of plants that can, in specific context, improve or deal with degraded soils, that can at times restore them, and certainly that can cope with more harsh climatic conditions that are on their way, is also important. So NUS is part of the agenda of climate change adaptation. As we know, NUS have been neglected That's why they are called NUS, but they have been mainly neglected by, if I may say, researchers and breeders and food traders and food processors. They have not been neglected by farmers, women and men in rural areas. They have not been neglected by indigenous peoples and local communities. So talking about NUS is obviously talking about the agrobiodiversity agenda, and in that case, more the cultivated agrobiodiversity, and position that in the broader agenda of biodiversity. And it's also talking about the rights and roles of rural populations in the conservation, management, use of these crops and their rights in terms of seeds. Last point is about, of course, by bringing back the wealth of the NUS agenda, it's to bring diversity and more robustness in the farming systems. So clearly for us, NUS are part and parcel of the agroecological transformation agenda that can help us to move towards sustainable agri-food systems in the world. So saying all this, and it has already been mentioned, so I will be quite quick on that, but they have been neglected and there are a lot of knowledge gaps. So the research agenda on that is important and needs to be accompanied. Like agroecology, I would say that talking about NUS is not at all looking at the past, but it's really going back to the future. Because there are no societies that are static. Ways of living, as said by François earlier, have evolved. So if we want to tackle, we'd say concretely, the agenda around NUS, it's really important for us to look at it from a value chain perspective, clearly integrating the needs and constraints of consumers, and looking at how we can make the policy environment conducive for the development of NUS. So just to conclude, NUS is already part of our agenda. We have a number of actions under play. We are a key contributor to the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources and the benefit sharing mechanism. That is one element of it. We have built programs in the past and we are working on new action. And I really hope that this webinar will certainly contribute to expand the collective knowledge on NUS, but also will help to concretely broaden partnerships for operational actions in many countries. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christophe. And it's fantastic to hear that the European Commission is committed behind this. Really good and important. The part of the solution you're presenting is about we've got to work across the whole value chain. Consumers are important, policy is important. So thank you, Christophe. That was excellent. So our next speaker is Dr. Carlo Rega, who is a scientific officer at the European Commission's Joint Research Centre. So Carlo, if you're online, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. And it's a pleasure to have the privilege to present here a few key messages from the knowledge review that we have been compiled as the Knowledge Center for Global Food and Nutrition Security of the Joint Research Center. Now, I have the privilege of being in the panel today, but I want to emphasize that this was a collective effort. So let me thank, first of all, my colleagues and co-authors, Caroline Kalinius, Felix Rembold, and also the colleagues from the French Research Institute, IRAM, who contributed to elaborating this knowledge review, Claire Ficini and Franca Marcel Momduja. They may be online here. Now, this document, maybe we can share the link in the chat. It's completely free, open access, as all the knowledge that is in the Knowledge Center that we manage. So you can download, distribute, disseminate it. I will not, of course, present all the content there in the interest of time. So I will focus on 4 key messages, key results that are very important to us, which may not sound completely new to an audience of news experts as we have today. So, but here the added value I would say is that we really managed to collect a lot of evidence. We screened more than 60 sources, many of which in turn were literature review, meta-analysis based on several studies. So we can say that let's say each statement now is underpinned by substantial evidence. So the first message that I want to deliver is, yes, we saw a lot of evidence on the fact that news can contribute to food and nutrition security. They are doing so in a number of ways, but mainly by buffering, acting as buffers during the lean season, and also offering opportunities for income diversification at household level. We collected several examples. One I would like to mention, for example, there is this indigenous banana in Ethiopia called Enset, which is a starch staple crop from millions of Ethiopians, and research found that during the devastating famines of the 80s, the Enset growing community reported much lower food insecurity than other communities. Second key message that we think is really important, it has been already mentioned by Christophe, but again, let me reiterate this. Yes, we found a lot of evidence on the potential contribution of these species to the transition towards sustainable and more resilient food system. The reasons have been explained. They are more adapted to poor soil. They can withstand more efficiently than mainstream crops harsher condition. So in a changing world, changing for the worse, unfortunately, they offer really an opportunity. Again, examples here are numerous. We have millet again, who has a very well-developed root system that can get water and also improve soil structure and improve the soil health overall. So different example, Bambara groundnut, for example, is one of the most drought tolerant crops in Africa. It's also nitrogen fixing crops. So there are really many examples of that. The third message that for us is really, really important, because it shows a possibility of win-win policies, win-win solution, is that we found significant positive, let's say, correlation between the promotion of news and the women's empowerment and gender equality in food system in rural areas. Why? Because most often is women who cultivate these crops, especially, for example, African leafy vegetables, who have the knowledge on cultivation, but also on processing them, cooking them, etc. So this is a clear example of a win-win situation. And the last message that I want to deliver that links to the to what Dana was also mentioning, we found also several examples, promising example of the use of news species for the preparation of ready-to-use therapeutic food, which is the food that you use in emergency situation when you have to deal with severe acute malnutrition. And this is, of course, positive because it can this food can be produced locally and at a lower cost. With this, I conclude, and I thank you again, the organizer, and I remain available for answering questions during the Q&A session. Thanks, Joanna, over to you.
Thank you, Carlo. And you know, this was really valuable, the 4 key points that you come up as a conclusion, and especially for the European Commission also as such a reputable organization to say, we also now recognize and have studied and see the news contributing, and in all those 4 areas: food, nutrition security, environmental sustainability, women, and the whole emergency food area. So, and that should give some good guidance for future research and policy. So thank you, Carlo, really valuable. Okay, so we'll go to the next speaker, Dr. Hamid El Bilali. Hamid is a senior researcher and scientific administrator with the International Centre for Advanced Mediterranean Agronomic Studies in Italy. So, Dr. Hamid, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Joanna. I am very pleased to take part in this webinar to share with you some insight and key messages also from the work we have been doing on NAS, especially in the Sahel. So my intervention regards, the NAS value chain, to which also Christophe mentioned, referred to. So we have what we can say that the value chain of NAS are generally non-existent in some cases for some of these NAS that are really neglected, disorganized, and not well developed in general. But of course, there is potential. Of course, there is a need to develop, these value chains, and with a particular focus on the marketing and value addition, which includes also, processing, in order to unlock, of course, their potential contribution to the socio-economic development in Africa. In the framework of the project SUSLIFE, it is a GFAiR project financed by the European Union. We carried out an analysis of the value chain of 8 NAS. This activity was led by the Alliance Biodiversity International, CIAT, and the NAS that we focused on in Burkina Faso and Niger were cassava, frafra potato, also called fabirama, sweet potato, moringa, roselle, okra, amaranth, and bambara groundnut that was also mentioned before. This analysis highlighted some bottlenecks in the value chains. One of them, of course, is access to quality seeds. Others are regard, for example, processing and marketing, which remains limited. But they also highlighted some opportunities because, especially in urban areas, there is a high demand for this NAS. They are no more regarded as poor, let's say, foods. So there is an interest that is due, of course, to some going back to tradition, but also health, benefit and so on. We believe that the development of NAS value chain requires a combination of investment in different fields, in the field of research, in the field of capacity building, and in the field of market information, and also equipment for processing, especially for women's group, as well as raising the awareness of consumers, because this is what can create and consolidate, of course, the demand for this NAS. We also think that highlighting the health and nutritional benefits of NAS to consumers, and also linking NAS to geographical indications, quality schemes, and also integrating them better into short value chain, supply chain, or also farmers market can help develop their value chain. And finally, just to conclude, we believe that there is a need and there is also an opportunity to link NAS to agroecology. This was also mentioned by Christophe, and this is what we are trying to do in the framework of the new initiative Agriconus Plus, in the framework of the GFAiR Plus initiative financed by the European Union, DG INTBA, where we link NAS to agroecology. NAS value chain to agroecology, because we believe that this is a win-win, relation. The promotion of NAS is important for the agroecological transition. For agroecological transition, we need adapted, of course, crops, and these NAS are the best adapted crops, to local conditions. But at the same time, the promotion of agroecology is important for the NAS agenda, because agroecology put at its center the valorization of local and traditional knowledge of farmers, the local resources, and NAS are by definition local resources, and there is a lot of traditional knowledge related to nuts. So this is an initiative, of course, that covers the whole value chain from production to consumption, through also processing and marketing. And very importantly, it's also addressed the policy and institutional environment. This is an initiative that is, of course, led by the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation, IFAD, and SwissAid. With that, I conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Hamid. That sounds very valuable to have done the 8 different value chain analyses under the GFAiR project. If there's anything yet released, I mean, you're welcome to put any links in the chat, because I'm sure people would be really interested to hear about that. Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Oluwole from Batumbi, who is with FARA. He's the Agricultural Director of Research and Innovation with FARA, the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa. So, Dr. Oluwole, over to you.
Thank you very much. Please kindly confirm if you can hear me loud and clear.
Very clear. Thank you.
I just want to make a few points around the policy incentive for integrating neglected and underutilized commodity into the food system in Africa and to get big benefit. I will not spend a lot of time, but also say that African Manifesto was developed under the guidance of GFAiR since the days of COVID, the year 2020. And this manifesto that represent the interest and the direction Africa want to go clearly state out concrete action to integrate this commodity into the food system. And so we truly know what to do. We know who to do it. We also know the importance of forgotten food for food and nutritional security. What I think is important is to do concrete advocacy to stimulate Africa-owned investment to drive the process. And I'm referring to investment in national research system structures to dedicate, to be dedicated to this commodity. Whatever name we give it, forgotten food, neglected and underutilized food, the question keeps coming, who forgot it? Who underutilized it? Then we can look at ourselves in the face and say, yeah, we are the one that is actually forgetting it. We need to put our own investment into it, and that's where I think effort is needed. Secondly, we can continue forever to say it is adapted to the environment, it is nutritionally savvy. If we did not take concrete action on what we have identified that we could do, then we will still continue to repeat the same thing. And this is 5 years in the going. I think strongly we need to give more attention to communication. This communication will influence the demand structure. And this is really very important. The few communications we've done around underutilized food, you can see in Africa now that the prices of those commodities have actually gone up even a lot beyond the conventional sources of calories. Today, Bambara granite is far more expensive in the market than conventional cowpea and soybean, and that is because demand is coming up. Now, all we need to do once we increase communication is that we stimulate naturally huge demand. People want to eat healthy food. Then we can invest into the supply mode so that this commodity gradually gets integrated into the food need, food demand, and for the populace. I want to say that as part of the policy push and action, we need to begin to develop businesses for the youth population with the forgotten food. And I think this requires intentional action, possibly establishing incubation system for production, for processing, for packaging, and for marketing. This also should be done concurrently with the development of the seed system, the genetic improvement research and development of new food. I am saying this because I know that efforts are going on. It's just that the vision for adapted crops and soil went down because of political issues across the globe. The VAX is already working on research for many of these, I think 16 commodities that were jointly developed. But if VAX isn't going to go that way, we need to persuade policy to create intentional actions with the National Agricultural Research System. I think we need to do more on the engagement of the private sector into this and the youth population. My last point, I think policy around the integration of neglected and underutilized food will work best at the national level. And I think it needs to concentrate on targeted commodity for the different nature. And this is going to influence the development of this commodity, or let me say development of appropriate policy and infrastructure. And when this happens, especially for Africa, where we have 55 countries, when there is this great effect, before you know it, it will build together the type of momentum we want to see at regional level and at the continental level. So in conclusion, I think we know what to do. We need to give attention to it and begin to do it and encourage ongoing effort. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Oluwole. It's I like it. What you're saying. It's let's get into action, and some of the advocacy, the communications, the marketing, getting to the consumers, getting the private sector involved, and then lastly your point about and policy's got to be part of all of this. So fantastic to have some real action points there. Thank you. So I'll just remind people you're welcome to put questions in the Q&A section as we go. Okay, so the next speakers, it's a duo, but there'll be one person speaking, but it's representing some work that FAO has been working on. So Dr. Ashia Noorani and also Pierre Ferrand will hand over, I think, to Pierre, who's going to present some of the work of FAO. Over to you.
No, it's Ashia, actually, who is going to talk.
Oh,
thank you very much. Ashia, over to you.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Pierre. And thank you for inviting us to this very interesting event, which is crucial for a lot of our work that we see today. So in providing a quick overview of our work, I'm going to respond to the three questions that we were given by Carlo on so the first question of which was, what are the benefits of NUS? Now, you've already heard a lot about these. It's a win-win solution. It targets the nexus in climate change, biodiversity, and nutrition. And of course, it contributes to improved livelihoods. We had published the third report on the state of the world's plant genetic resources earlier this year. And we were informed by countries that there are 587 underutilized crops. These were by 63 countries responded to us, and that these crops have potential for commercialization. So countries are well aware of the potentials of these crops. There are fruits that were the most represented, and followed by vegetables. FAO had also undertaken an initiative called the Future Smarts Food Initiative. And analysis, one part of this initiative was to undertake a conflict policy analysis. What does that mean? It means what are the policies that are in place and how these may conflict with promoting NUS in these countries. So that was a very interesting project. There was an interesting publication, which I invite you to peruse. As has been mentioned many times, FAO recognizes that NUS are key components of agroecological transition to sustainable agri-food systems, without which we cannot adapt to marginal and challenging environments in a sustainable manner. We've already heard about Bambara groundnut, but another example that you're aware of is fonio. These are Brazilian crops, drought tolerant, often saline tolerant, millets as well, as mentioned by Joanna earlier today. And of course, legumes, which are crucial for soil fertility. Not to forget our friends, the pollinators. So NUS are pollinator allies. And by this, we mean their NUS provide foods that are crucial, especially in the temporal diversity dimension. They provide a refuge for pollinators, and they provide also a safety with regard to low inputs, which means that these NUS, being low input requirement species, have low pesticides and fertilizer applications. Therefore, pollinators are safer. In responding to the second question, what are the biggest bottlenecks, as mentioned already by previous speakers, is the issue of access to quality germplasm. Many farmers actually would love to plant NUS, but they don't know where to access this germplasm or how this germplasm may be highly productive. So that is a huge bottleneck. We recognize the importance of the processing and value addition one, and this is something that was mentioned earlier, and countries responded to us by informing us that this is their bottleneck as well. There's the concept of the poor man's food, and therefore the awareness raising is crucial. And while, as mentioned by previous speakers, this concept is changing, the perception is changing over time, we do need to still promote these crops and species, both wild and cultivated. And of course, with this maybe lack of awareness, we have hand in hand a loss of traditional knowledge and their place in culture. And already we spoke about the role of women, and I would like to highlight that today is the International Day of Rural Women for the United Nations, so it's directly relevant to many of these livelihoods. With the third element, what are the key recommendations? Well, we need policies. We need policies in place to promote commercialization, to promote the on-farm diversity and management, and for the diversification of diets. We know all the hidden hunger issues. There's a need to cultivate these crops and the knowledge associated with them, the documentation of this knowledge, national seed policies that facilitate participation of stakeholders along the value chain, and taking into account traditional knowledge systems and practices. And finally, you know, we have to never remove the health elements, because that is a major marketing force. So while we look at the resilient aspects, the health, the culture, and it comes full circle back to this win-win nexus. And I think I can stop there. Pierre, maybe if there's anything else, I'll leave you also to add something.
I think you covered it all, and we had a very limited time. So let's see if there are any questions coming up afterwards.
Okay, thanks, Pierre and Ashia. And thank you for reminding us that it's International Day of Rural Women, and this is a particularly pertinent topic in that area. So thank you for that. Really amazing that you had countries identify 587 neglected and underutilized species that they felt had commercial potential. That's huge. So there's a lot of work ahead of us to get to that. And if you have any link to your publication of your work on that, I'm sure everyone listening would love to see that, and you could pop that in the chat. Okay, so our next speaker, very exciting topic. So Nico Wilms-Possen is with the Crop Trust in Germany, and he's leading a really new initiative, which is doing some exciting work. So he's leading the project. He's a project coordinator for the Power of Diversity Funding Facility. Has a very impressive name. Over to you, Nico.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joanna, and thanks also to the organizers of the webinar of the JRC, DG INPA, DG ECHO for having us here as a crop trust, and yeah, allowing me to share the crop trust perspective on that. So I would like to look at the topic, of course, where it all starts. For us, it starts with the seed, and even earlier, it starts, of course, with the genetic diversity that we conserve through the global gene bank system. Also 2 points on the backdrop on why we're doing that. We noted 80% of decline of crop diversity where it has been measured over the last 80 years, so really a long-term trend that we see. And also from the nutrition angle, I would just like to highlight, you will have seen the various attention around the Eat Lancet 2.0 report, where also one action area specifically highlights the role of healthy and traditional diets. And if you read between the lines, I think that really amplifies the message that we stand here together. I would like to bring up 4 major points that also link to what previous speakers have said. The first one is future orientation. And I think I tend perhaps to slightly disagree with that it doesn't matter how we call these crops, because the previous speaker also said communication matters. And I think for me, we talk about opportunity crops in our context, which of course gained a bit of more popularity around the vax movement. But still, I think it's important because we talk about opportunities in the future. And if we talk opportunities, we have a future-oriented perspective to these crops and how these crops respond to challenges and transformation processes that we see 10, 20, 30 years down the line. So I think that's very important, especially also with regard to seed systems development. If we bear in mind that breeding processes do take a lot of time, 10 to 15 years until varieties are really taken up by farmers in Africa from the research perspective. So really important to have a long-term and future-oriented perspective. From our project perspective, we have prioritized 14 opportunity crops that we are engaging on over the next 5 years in 7 countries at the moment. And we really try to, in the identification of this, do so with a food systems perspective and also with a foresight perspective, which was an interesting exercise, and we'll publish a policy paper on that later this year or early next year. Second point I think that I would like to highlight is recognizing and working with informality. That is true, of course, for the seed sector. On the one hand, it was already mentioned that the potential basically is lagging behind. There's little national breeding programs on opportunity crops ongoing, but still, I think we also should appreciate, I think, the ambition, you know, to highlight these crops in national food systems agendas and so forth, and thereby also an implication to the seed sector. But I think looking at the institutional discontinuity between gene banks, breeders, and seed producers, and the informality in that, looking often also at the regulatory misfit between formal variety registration and opportunity crop seeds, and also the market fragmentation in the seed sector, I think is quite an important entry point for that. However, informality not only in the seed system, but also looking at aspects of food safety, finance, certification, and so forth is important here. The third point that I want to make, perhaps not surprisingly from the crop trust perspective, genetic diversity is a strategic resource. And there I also want to highlight the point that Ashia just made. I think the plant genetic resources hold the current answers to many challenges that are occurring. And the conservation of this is just assuring that we still have these options and answers available in the long term for further breeding, and that we don't lose these valuable assets of biodiversity. And I think that given advances in life science, given advances in digital technology, AI, can really lift this treasure that many gene banks around the world currently hold and will still hold for the futures. So what we did also with our one of our programs, Seeds for Resilience, is bridging basically the link between farmers and gene banks through germplasm user groups, which also showed higher awareness basically of the role of agroecological practices, crop diversity, and also gene banks as institutions. I will share a link on that publication later on. And as you know, the work is also with the relevance to DG ECHO. I also wanted to highlight the relevance of conflict situations around that, not only on the use and the potential nutritional benefits of opportunity crops, but also on the potential threat that such crises and conflicts evolve or have basically on gene banks as such. So that is crucial, and we're also supporting gene banks in safeguarding their collections in emergency situations. Last point, collaboration. Joanna mentioned the Power of Diversity Funding Facility. You're welcome to get in touch with us. It's a multi-donor facility now commissioned between 2025 and 2029. Which receives support from Germany and Ireland, but of course also we're not looking for donors to come on board, but also different stakeholders to provide a platform to share expertise and learning around these crops. So thank you very much for having us again.
Okay, thank you, Nico. So it'll be interesting to see how you go with the 14 different opportunity crops you're working on, and of course the crop trust, that's not just farm to fork, it's seed to fork. And we can't forget that beginning part, which is critical for the rest to work. All right, so thank you, Nico. So our next speaker, I think it's a duo again, but I think we've got Simone Welton and also Arno Bratt. So Arno is the Global Head of Sector Strategy, Knowledge and Learning, and he's with the WHH, which is one of a very large international NGO focused on overcoming hunger. So over to you, I think, Arno.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the invitation. I will provide the presentation today, and I'm very much looking forward to engaging with all of you. Actually, Dana has already highlighted the horrific numbers on wasting. Of course, the problem of stunting and wasting is actually set to worsen as the risk of catastrophic crop failures is rising. Yields are at the risk of decline, already declining in a couple of countries, including also in the European Union, by the way. And conventional staples are becoming less nutrient dense as atmospheric pressure rises. So essentially, even when we're producing more food, it becomes less nutritious. And in that context, opportunity crops are not optional, they are necessary, because if we look at the existing data, take for instance the data on macronutrient deficiencies, we can see that even in the most optimistic scenario, conventional methods such as, for instance, large-scale fortification, while crucially important, can only cover about half of all macronutrient gaps. That is according to estimates from this year, and presently approximately only 1 out of 6 of all deficiencies. And so we need an all-out effort, and this very much includes opportunity crops. And so in helping to figure this riddle out, WHH has produced a study called A Growing Opportunity for Nutrition, where we looked at macronutrient deficiencies in the 41 countries with the highest levels of hunger, according to the Global Hunger Index. We looked at the nutrient composition of cooked portions of 20 opportunity crops and their edible parts. And then based on that, actually 12 macronutrients, and specifically to what extent macronutrient gaps could be closed. So what did we find out? In general, opportunity crops have a very high potential to reduce macronutrient gaps, especially in hard-to-reach areas. And this counts for calcium, for folate, for riboflavin, vitamin C, vitamin A, vitamin E, and many others. And crucially, even when we look at those that are less bioavailable, such as iron, zinc, and magnesium, we see that just by factoring in the sheer quantity that can come from opportunity crops, it can still make sense to integrate opportunity crops in strategies for closing those gaps as well. And so if we look a bit more into the details, then we can see that the benefits are particularly pronounced for double win opportunity crops, that is crops that have 2 edible parts, including leaves. The green leafies really stand out very positively, such as cocoyam, amaranth, cowpea, and quite a few others. If we look at the density, not per calories, but per gram, the image changes a little bit, and we still see the green leafies on top, but actually groundnut rising to the very top. And then, of course, we have a couple of specialist heroes, such as orange/sweet potato for vitamin A, and among the grains, fonio turns out as the most macronutrient dense grain. So what's quite interesting is that if we now actually look at the extent to which opportunity crops, if produced more, could actually close macronutrient gaps, the answer is very context specific, but generally speaking, yes. I'm going to give you an example from India here. We did a back of the sheet calculation based on these existing available data, and we found out that if 20% of rice on plates was reduced, replaced with amaranth, then approximately 90% or more, reaching into more than 100% of macronutrient gaps could be closed for macronutrients, and then others could be covered to a very significant extent. There are marginal trade-offs with other macronutrients to be considered, but that can be factored in a whole foods dietary strategy. And so if you would like to understand a little bit more, I can definitely recommend the report, A Growing Opportunity for Nutrition, that we have produced, which contains a wealth of other types of insight and also an interactive dashboard that you can use for your efforts in research, in policies, in programs, also in startups and enterprise building, to identify which opportunity crops to scale in what exact context to close which micronutrient gaps. And by the way, we do include quite a few more pieces of insight there, so feel free to check them out. For instance, we found out that approximately 60% of national policies already consider opportunity crops, but only 14% do so from a nutrition angle. So there is this clear need to actually connect that back. And that, of course, brings me to the question of what do we actually recommend? Number one, there is still a need to invest in data, in R&D, and in innovation, not just in seed systems, although crucially there as well, but also in consumer insight, in building delicious and convenient products, in light processing and other forms of research and development to bring prices down. And then beyond that, there's a definite need to scale opportunity crops in a location-appropriate manner from a nutrition sensitivity standpoint. There's third, a need to promote coherent and nutrition-sensitive policies. We've also done a coherence analysis on that. And of course, lastly, embedding opportunity crops in wider nutrition and food system strategies is very crucial. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Arno, and good to have some data to show how these opportunity crops can really make a difference with the micronutrients, and the importance to not forget nutrition. And as we said at the beginning, it's about bringing all these solutions together in unison is critical and not work in silos. So it's a really important. Thank you very much, Arno. So our next speaker is Dr. Katrin Glatzel. So Dr. Katrin is a public policy specialist, and she is the Director of Global Strategy and Programs at Academia 2063, based in Rwanda. So over to you, Katrin.
Yes, thank you so much, Joanna. And yeah, good morning, everybody from Kigali. It's been fascinating to listen to the very interesting interventions so far over the past hour, and delighted to be here today. In the interest of time and also to avoid too much repetition, I'll be focusing on two research areas that I believe deserve or need a bit more attention. One emerging opportunity, and then two important factors that we need to keep in mind as the NUS agenda is moving forward. So the first under-researched area is that we need to better understand the link between NUS and trade. So it's critical to understand better, or even better, where specific micronutrient deficiencies are most severe and most prevalent, ideally at subnational level, district level, or even a more granular level. This would allow us to target the application of NUS more precisely, but also at scale to ensure that the micronutrients can be delivered. Now, the key research question here is whether the production and consumption of these NUS can be then scaled sufficiently to address local nutrition gaps. if local scaling is not a feasible option, there's the option to explore nutrient-smart trade systems where countries and regions specialize in the production of certain nuts and then trade them based on nutritional needs. So that requires a little bit of a shift from thinking about trading in commodities to trading in micronutrients. And we've at Academia 2063 have started doing some research into this, but yeah, significant more work in the area is needed. The second research area that I think we need to pay more attention to, and it's been mentioned briefly by colleagues from FAO, is the issue around uptake and desirability of nuts. So much of the current discourse focuses on improving accessibility and affordability of nuts, but accelerating consumer demand and uptake is equally critical. Many nuts are considered as poor people's food, are culturally undesirable, and that of course hampers adoption, despite nuts having, as we've all heard, important nutritional values and other benefits, climate resilience, etc. So there's really a pressing need to better understand how consumers make food choices, sort of what are the cultural, social, economic and other factors that influence their decisions, and how can we use these insights to reposition nuts as desirable and aspirational. And here research is needed into behavioral change. I think that's a very critical area, understanding the drivers at household level, community level, learning from food marketing, but also looking at culinary innovation. And we've seen some very good examples that we can actually learn from. Very briefly, and Arno, you had both of them on your slides as well. Fonio has been championed by Senegalese chef Pierre Thiam and others for a long time, and we've seen a substantial increase in production, but also fonio uptake in meals, traditional meals, but also so-called Western diets. It's used as ingredient for beer. Brooklyn Beer Brewery is now using fonio in its production. But we can also learn from other examples, for example, biofortification and OFSP. So how was the demand and desirability improved for those crops? Now, one untapped opportunity is the link between bioeconomy and nuts. We've seen, or we are seeing, many regions across the world that are expanding their bioeconomy agendas and are transitioning to a bioeconomy. And there's a huge untapped potential to produce bio-based products such as bioplastics, biofertilizers, or bioenergy from nuts. Sorghum, cassava, and moringa are just a few examples. For example, for bioproducts, bioplastics I mentioned, but also nutraceuticals, cosmetics. So the list here of opportunities is quite long. Of course, in that context, important to elevate the research agenda on identifying suitable nuts for this, assess biomass potential, but also ensure that that transition and the use of nuts in bio-based industries does not compromise food security or local biodiversity. And then very briefly, two important factors to keep in mind. One, and I think Arshia and Hamid also briefly touched on this, is the importance of elevating and leveraging the traditional knowledge systems as we expand the nuts agenda. Traditional knowledge plays a pivotal role in the cultivation, processing, and also consumption of nuts, but its inclusion must be done equitably and safeguard and prevent exploitation or extraction of knowledge from local communities without involving them. So we need to look at co-production of knowledge, IP rights, and community-led innovation, just to name a few. And then lastly, and I'll close with that, are the trade-offs. So I briefly mentioned that already in the bioeconomy context, But yeah, scaling NUS raises important questions around trade-offs. What are the implications for land use, water use, labor, biodiversity, and yeah, what are the implications for that? So what would a full transition to NUS, for example, mean for climate adaptation in terms of economic costs, farmer incentives, and consumer behavior? So much more research, I think, is needed to look also in these more uncomfortable questions around trade-offs. As much as I think we can all agree, we're very excited about the opportunities and benefits of NUS. And with that, back to you, Joanna. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Katrine. You really brought forward very new and different ideas and quite a range from trade in micronutrients. So maybe instead of green credits, we can get nutrition credits going. And the whole behavior change, because at the end of the day, the consumers have to drive this. And then coming up with new ideas for bio-based markets with the NUS and then the real importance of how all of this is community-led and community-owned and looking at all the trade-offs. So really, really big important points and really identifying key areas for research and policy there that can help. So thanks, Katrine. They were excellent. So we're almost at our Q&A section. We have just one speaker who's just going to do more an opening statement and pulling a few things together for the Q&A session, which will follow. So Dr. Maddie Sissi is a full professor in food processing and science. So we get a different discipline and angle here. And Dr. Maddie is with the University of Dakar. So over to you, Maddie.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to Joanna for introducing me. It's a real pleasure on behalf of Cheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar and the African Nutrition Society to participate in this event. My presentation will focus on the following question: what strategy should be adopted to exploit the potential of NUS to achieve food security and sustainable food system in Africa? As you know, Africa is the second most populous continent after Asia. The African population is expected to continue to grow. A growing population means more food to produce or to buy. In the first case, we face various constraints such as funding gap for the agricultural sector, land degradation, climate shock, low levels of raw material processing, etc. About the second option related to food imports, the bill is high. In 2023, Africa spent more than 83 billion importing food. This value grows up to 110 billion in 2025. This is a paradox given the diversity of local raw materials and their exceptional nutritional and organoleptic qualities, are saying by the previous speakers. NUS have higher nutritional value and can prevent some disease and contribute to achieve food and nutritional security. My colleague Fatundi from FARA highlighted this in his speech. I would like to ask him how and which actors need to be mobilized to achieve food and nutritional security in Africa, including use of NUS. To exploit the potential offered by NUS for sustainable food system and food security, in my humble opinion, we should act on two major levels. The first is changing African eating habits and increasing the rate of processing food. About changing eating habits, except to some countries with continuity in their food tradition, Africans have adopted eating habits based mainly on non-African dishes and menus. At the same time, the urbanization of the African population continues to increase. What are the options to change this situation? The first step is communication on scientific evidence on the quality and richness of NUS and encourage existing initiatives to disseminate information on the health benefits and nutritional value of African food. The second step is to produce ready-to-eat food, taking account new lifestyle in appropriate packaging. To carry out these two things, these two steps, concrete communication action as necessary, as Fatundi mentioned before, but which one, how, and where? So a holistic approach must be adopted, including local producers of these foods, food technology, agri-food industry, and chefs. For example, food technology must play a key role in improving the efficiency, safety, and sustainability of the food supply chain, from production to distribution, including food processing and packaging. But according to Hamid and El Bilali, the value chain of news are generally non-existent or not well developed. What should you do, Hamid? What should you do, dear participant? The chef must play an important action in creating demand for neglected and underutilized resources by incorporating them into their menus, raising consumer awareness, and promoting local producers. Our traditional product will have to move from occasional consumption to regular or normal consumption. They should no longer be considered exotic. How to make this transition? Highlighting the health of nutritional benefit of news to consumers, according to Hamid, concrete action of communication, according to Fatundu. Are they sufficient or are they other? What about the involvement of the private sector, civil society, and consumer association? About the rate of processing, it's below 20% in most African countries, so it needs to be significantly improved to unlock the potential of news. For this reason, among others, under UNIDO and the African Development Bank, that project to establish agropole and agricultural product processing zone are multiplying in Africa. In Senegal, government wished to establish 5 agropole to increase the rate of processing of agricultural product, including news, contribute to reducing the trade deficit by increasing export and substituting import. I had the opportunity to coordinate the agropole project at the national level on behalf of UNIDO. Ladies and gentlemen, in conclusion, to use neglected and underutilized species for sustainable food system and food security is not an illusion. It's possible. Food technology and the agri-food industry must contribute to creating demand for traditional and local food. They must offer processed and packaging food that meet the preference of consumer, particularly of modern urban consumer and their lifestyle. You need to increase the number of chefs integrating African neglected and underutilized species in nouvelle cuisine, receive and growing numbers of African restaurants serving traditional food both in Africa and in the West. Thank you for our listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Maddy, for your strong conviction and action items that you're recommending. Very strongly, so fantastic, and that should open the floor well now to our Q&A session. We've got behind the scenes Caroline Kalenius, who's one of the scientific officers at the Joint Research Centre at the European Commission, and also Carolina with the European Commission in the technical specialists. So we've got people behind the scenes helping us. I'll pick up a few questions, and what I might do is read 2 or 3 questions at a time and ask all of our speakers to listen to this and who would like to answer to come in with this. So one question was from Luigi Guaranio, who I think might be our Crop Trust Luigi. Luigi has asked, what do the JRC with the European Commission, what do the authors of their report think is different about this current wave of interest in NUS, if you think there is anything different? But there certainly does seem to be a new wave of interest. So how do you think this is different this time, and are we going to do anything different this time? So think about that question. Well, there's also one from François Stepman from GFAiR, and possibly to Professor Wally Fatunbi at FARA, but anyone can answer this. So the question is, what about the ownership by the NAS, by the national systems of the VAX program, which is about these opportunity crops? So how are we engaging? How are the NAS having ownership in this? And the third question, then I'll open it to anyone to come in and discuss these, is from Remy Kahane at ICRISAT. And Remy has said, related to what Hamid said, but maybe Carlo or someone else could talk about, and this is really important, talk about what happened with the quinoa boom and what are the lessons learned. And if anyone has some input on that, very welcome, because it's really important we learn from the lessons of what went right, what was right and what went wrong, so we learn for the future. So if I can open up those three questions, anyone who's been a speaker, please just come on in so we don't lose time and have any comments on that.
Hey, Joanna, can I quickly come in on the questions that speaks to VAX?
Please.
And I'm happy that I've been part of VAX till now, and I'm still an enthusiast of VAX. The coordination headquarters for VAX is in Mexico with CIMIT, and CIMIT is the global coordinator. AGRA and FARA was requested to coordinate the African action of VAX. Well, we moved these significantly until the political shake that affected VAX and the initial resources we have for VAX goes in. We will lose a huge opportunity if we did not stand up as a continent to take the advantage of VAX and run with it. I know that CIMIT is still moving on, but we are not, the African partners, we are not dead. As it relates to your key questions, engagement of NAS in VAX. Let me say that before VAX came up, we have our platform that is made up of 570 individuals. Okay, I saw people pasting into it that is working, and good work is gone. This year we've had 2 engagements again, and between the end of this year and 2026, FARA also will be working with FAO to develop the state of affairs and come up with concrete action that we need to take. So let me say that your question is also a challenge for us to effectively engage the national system more in this integration effort. Thank you.
If I may, regarding the question
please.
on the quinoa example, I would like to explain what approach that we used, and of course in order to avoid some of this let's say limitation but also risk that we can have with the promotion of NAS. First of all, we believe in the importance of involving communities and involving countries in the selection from the beginning. In the case, for example, of Swiss Life, it took us about 6 months to select 6 NAS. So you can imagine we had organized of course some meetings with experts, a survey. We have contacted of course authorities and ministries in the countries of interest, Burkina Faso and Niger, and we have also had meeting with the communities, because for us participation, agency, bottom-up approach and ownership are keywords in the whole process. That being said, it is important for us, of course, to promote those crops that contribute to local and domestic food and nutrition security. And that's why also, in the selection of the crops, in the active involvement of local actors, because, for example, we have, some developed, gene bank at level of universities in those two countries. We have also promoted seed banks at level of communities. So we are working really with the communities and with local, stakeholders. But at the same time, we see an opportunity sometimes, to move from local and domestic level maybe to international level, especially for some crops. So while prioritizing, of course, the needs and the food sovereignty, the food sufficiency at domestic level, we see that sometimes there is also an opportunity for export, and we do not exclude, of course, that, because this is also in the vision of the development of the value chain of NAS. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamid. That's great. And Arno, I see you have your hand up, so go right ahead.
Thank you very much. Danny Hunter has mentioned, and if you're not here, we'll see each other later at some point, but he's mentioned that people don't eat research papers. And that is very, very, very crucial. People eat what is cheap, what is cool, what is convenient, and to help make that happen, we need consumer insight. We need new types of products. We need to invest in processing. I have to repeat the comments made by Professor Wole Fatumbi here. And that is crucially an element that is currently being underinvested in. So really working together around innovation hubs, around food innovation, essentially, and taking a market approach led by African, by Asian, also by European businesses, based on what people want. That is going to be the next frontier. We are working on that, as are many others, and that is the next thing that we will need to get behind on together between civil society, private sector, the research and science community, and governments.
Absolutely. Thank you, Arno. Now we've got hands up from Katrine and then Carlo.
Yeah, thanks, Joanna. I wanted to just add to what Wole said on the NARS, but decouple a little bit from the VAX conversation. I think the ownership of NARS is super important, especially in the context of NUS. We spoke about understanding what can trigger consumer uptake and desirability. So NARS are in the countries, they understand local contexts, they understand consumer preferences, consumer behavior. They work with farmers on the ground. So really investing in building the capacity of NARS is crucial if we want to go to a scale with NUS across the continent. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlo?
Thank you, Joanna, and thanks for the very relevant questions. No easy answer, but I will try to address some of them. What I see new here is mainly two things, I would say. One is that it's increasingly clear that whatever metric you use to measure, current food systems are not delivering what they are supposed to deliver in terms of food security, in terms of food accessibility, in terms of environmental impact, climate change. So there is an increasing recognition of the fact that some different options are needed, and NUS have been there for centuries, if not millennia. So that's why one reason why it's even ever more there's more and more interest in that, because they are we don't need to reinvent any wheel. They are there, and they are a solution that is proven to work. Yeah, of course, it's always context dependent. No one is claiming that they can completely replace mainstream crops, but I mean, they are part of the solution. The second point that I would like to make very briefly is that indeed we also covered that in the knowledge review. We have examples. Quinoa is one of that. Teff in Ethiopia is another one of crops that were considered NUS, and then they experienced a boom in the market. which led to some negative consequences, especially in terms of higher prices for domestic consumption and so on. So we already know what happens. I mean, because when a news experiences a boom, it becomes, as any other crop, a commodity. So a commodity is embedded in the market and value chain in which it is produced. So what are the lessons learned from the teff and the quinoa boom? First of all, that they have been addressed, these negative consequences in different ways, both with the top-down, let's call it, approach by governments banning exports, for example, of teff in Ethiopia, or bottom-up, mainly in the case of quinoa, by involving farmers' organization and seeing together what solution could be devised. So probably a blend of the two approaches is needed, but it's essential to include the different players in the value chain, including government, institutional, producers, and consumers, in being more aware. Very last point, consumer awareness is crucial. Information to consumer is crucial, but let's avoid, I would suggest, putting all the burden to consumers. That's not only the case for news, but for many other things, like more greener choices as well. Of course, consumers need to be awareness, but no major change can be driven only by demand and by consumer. That's not how the economic works. It's work only in the books and in the academic papers that people don't read, that there is a demand and a supply, and then you reach a kind of equilibrium. I mean, for food, this doesn't work like this. So consumer awareness is essential, but let's avoid putting all the burden to consumers. Okay, producers and governments also have policies have a role here. Thanks.
Very good point, Carlo. Yes, it's going to take a multiple prong approach. Excellent. Okay, we'll just have one more set of questions, and then our final speaker, who's got the really challenging task of pulling all this together. So some of the questions, and I'll ask anyone to step in, but just with short answers. Rika Thanopoulos has said to the EC, what's any direct support or policies for NUS? And actually a few speakers have been asking what funding is available, what are governments going to do and contribute. So anything generally on that, especially from the EC. But also Stephanie Greibel has said that it's been mentioned that NUS are neglected by breeders, by scientists, by food processors, etc. So why is this, and what is the responsibility of donors and governments, and will more money be made available to solve this? So a good sort of few questions to end on. It's like the actions next and who's supporting this, how might people take this forward, particularly the European Commission, but not only them, because everybody's got a role to play. So over to anyone who'd like to make some final comments on this before we have our final speaker.
Yes, can I? Oh, okay, one hand is on, so maybe.
Thank you, Wale.
Oh, I thought Anos has a hand is on, or that's an hold on. If it's an hold on, then let me quickly take the floor.
I'll happily come up to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And I consider this discussion as something that can birth a change. Number one is the second question, the neglect, and it has been by who? It is not as if there are no researchers. There are several researchers in Africa that are interested and are struggling to improve. I saw one colleague put comments on what our university is doing on underutilized vegetable, which is quite good. I know several others across the continent that are working and are struggling. So when we say forgotten or underinvestment in it, it is donors. And we understand that in Africa, the donor Africa funders response is still very low, well underdeveloped, but effort is going on to persuade. And that is where the neglect is. And I'm bold to say to my African colleagues on this platform that if we truly want an African-owned and an African-led process, then it must be African-funded. And that is where we need to work internally and then to reach out to our policymaker and development partners. If we pitch it at the continental level, then we have to go to African Union and now Nepal that is already doing something in that direction. But more importantly, we need to reach out to our funders, to our philanthropists, to our celebrities, to put something into the development, because 46% of this commodity at the global level reside in Africa, and they are part of our traditional food system. If we bring it up, we are the one that benefits. So, what I expect in terms of resources from the EC is if we are able to harmonize the NUS movement with maybe agroecology movement and all those stuff, maybe we can get a bit of resources to trigger more investment from the Africa. And this is my concrete and honest opinion. So the neglect is around resources for research, for development effort, and the policy actions that should be taken. They are clear, they are known, but we need to communicate it in a more proactive way. Thank you. Back to you.
Great. Thanks, Wale. And yeah, other speakers, right. Arno, a new hand. Okay, go ahead. And there's more after that, sorry. Yeah, so go ahead, and then we'll go to Christophe, and then Arisha. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I'm so glad you came before me, because that will radically shorten my speech time and was put so much more eloquently than I could have put it. Thank you for that. So I only have minor additions. But I feel also crucial ones. So there is this conception of poor people's food, but there is something else happening. We see an increase in trade, especially, by the way, also informal trade at lowest local levels all the way to intercontinental levels, and a shaping preference toward more formalized markets. Folks accessing more supermarkets, as an example, more food markets, etc. And what comes with that as a side effect is that people are leaning increasingly more toward fatty, oily, oftentimes empty carbs type of foods. And so essentially we see that general consumer shift potentially preventing a scale-up of larger scale adoption of opportunity crops, or as a matter of fact, any types of nutritious foods, especially whole foods, especially whole grains, vegetables, and fruits and nuts. And so that is to be kept in mind. And I would break it down as basically saying we need to understand where people come from and where they presently are with their lives and their realities, and make food convenient and delicious to meet them where they are. So that is definitely one aspect. There is, of course, the obvious bit of underinvestment that has been much discussed. And I will also have to stress just one bit that Katrin Glatzel has already highlighted as well, which is we need to keep in mind crop suitability, also the knowledge about that, which is still quite scarce. So where exactly does it make most sense to integrate them in order to maximize overall output, particularly output of nutritional benefits? And many of the opportunity crops currently, while being more resilient and oftentimes actually a better investment in climate stress conditions, don't tend to be as high yielding. And what that means is not only that there are land use consequences and profitability consequences for farmers, but it also means that farmers who are already facing a lot of climate stress today will be quite cautious to adopt a new type of crop without even knowing if it's going to yield the same productivity, production, and profits. And so that is something that can be very much addressed through science, but maybe also to some extent through private sector-led solutions and better education.
Okay, thanks, Arno. We'll go to Christophe. We'll follow with Ashia, and then Hamed, and then Maddie. And that will be our last of the comments because of time constraints. Over to you, Christophe.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you also for this wonderful event and the huge interest that this topic is getting. And of course, I would like to respond to my dear friend Patumbi from FARA. Of course, an actor like the European Union can be a contributor only to this agenda. It has to be owned and framed by, in the context of Africa, by African organizations. And as you may remember, we have been also through our support to GFAiR supporting the emergence of the African Manifesto on Forgotten Food. We play different roles on this agenda by, as I said, supporting the activities on the International Treaty on Plant Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture and the benefit sharing mechanism. That is a concrete way also to advance, in many cases, the agenda around the SIV, even if it's not the core topic. Colleagues from the Siam Bari and Hamid presented in a nutshell an initiative that we are ready to launch, Agroeconus, that will bring together ourselves, IFAD, Italian cooperation, and some important Swiss actors on this news agenda with significant actions at country level, and the Wole also an opportunity to build out of this program a much more, would say, framed and coordinated agenda with African counterparts. And there, of course, we would more than welcome a role for FARA and beyond in this dialogue. We support GFAiR. GFAiR has some collective action on forgotten food. GFAiR has a role to play to bring a global dimension to that. So, and of course, to connect with other actors that are participating in this event, and to somehow not to connect with what has emerged in the context of the VAX initiative, as you know, that is still up and running. So there, all the ingredients are there. As you like to say, we know that, but what do we do? So, yeah, we and African counterparts have also to come and say, okay, this is how we would like to work with you. And you know that our door is always open for this kind of conversation. And to bring the key players, and FAO is also, of course, an important one on this too. So it's not a closed club. What we aimed at ourselves with this specific action that we are promoting, completed by other country actions that we have. I don't want to, but it's really to say, okay, now, okay, let's move concretely on some of these crops with this integrated vision, build what is there, make the links with national systems, but of course, elevate that as part of an existing agenda on the African continent. When you remember some statements from heads of states at Kampala, I remember the statement from a president of Uganda referring to crops of this childhood, and how they are important for him and for the population. The momentum is there. Then it's the how we are putting together all these different initiatives that are complementing each other, and we need African leaderships on that point. Thank you.
Yeah, we are ready, Christophe. So let's pull together and deliver together.
I'm sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christophe. I think you've answered a lot of questions. So those with their hands up, just if you don't mind, just a very quick statement from each of you. Thank you. So Ashia, you are next.
Thank you, Joanna. Very quickly to respond to a few of the queries on how we move forward, I think one of the easiest ways is to share best practices. You will know firsthand on the success stories of millets in India from, in 15 years, the mainstreaming of those, policy analyses that we've undertaken in different countries. We've also undertaken a lot of different mainstreaming of underutilized fruits and vegetables in different ways. How to avoid fragmentation is to have a coordinated bottom-up and top-down approach, multi-stakeholder. That's been the success story analysis that we've seen over the years. We continue to foster this. Next year, we plan on holding a nice big event on mainstreaming news in Africa. This is planned possibly with the professor who has been speaking, Ole, and we will look at how to move forward. But we continue to work on this, and change, permanent change doesn't happen overnight, but it can happen, and other countries have shown this can happen. So the way forward from what we've seen is a multi-stakeholder approach from all different angles. And I think I'll just stop there.
Thanks, Ashia. Good point. Hamid, over to you for just a final quick point.
Yeah, just I would like, to comment on the actions. I think that there is nowadays, clear understanding what is needed and the actions that are needed. We need to support, the seed systems. This is a very important, point. We need also to invest in research. Research, because there are knowledge gaps, but also research to document also the traditional knowledge that we have out there and to build on that, of course, agroecological specification for us. We need to invest in capacity building and also training, because what happened is that most of that knowledge got lost. So young people in many areas that are even interested in growing those crops, they don't know, how to grow them. So we need also, to invest in that. And then we need also to invest in equipment, for example, for processing, value addition, market information, but also the policy, because some analysis what we carried out in West Africa, there are some policies, for example, subsidies that are against, these nuts. And against, anyway, the diversification of the farming system. And we need, of course, to pay particular attention to governance, so multi-stakeholder approach, inclusiveness, and of course the agency, including all the actors that are, important. And this is something that we are trying, as Christoph said, to do in Agriculture Plus project within the GFAiR Plus initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Hamid. Maddie, a very quick word from you, and then our last
Joanna.
person is Dana. Yes, Dana, you are getting the last word.
No, sorry, it's too much.
No, very important. And actually, it's apt that we end on you. You gave us the big picture and the seriousness of everything at the beginning. So I really think at the end of this Q&A session, it'll be good to have your perspective at the end. But Maddie, if you don't mind just having a very quick word so we hear what you your comments.
Quickly. Just to add something, the necessity to include news in program to combat malnutrition should be encouraged by government. Also, similarly, incorporating the news into school canteen in the primary school, middle school, and university would facilitate their acceptance among children and young people who could then act as relays to their parents, etc. And the last thing is the government must do a structuration for this news sector in the same way as major value chains such as peanuts, such millet and rice also. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you. Lots to do. Okay, Dana, I'm really keen to hear your thoughts after listening to all of this as well. Over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm not so sure you will be so keen in hearing when I'm done. But I have a challenge for you all because you are scientists. And I want to introduce to you a new perspective on news that was not so much discussed today, and it's the medical one in the humanitarian response. As probably a lot of you know, most of our response rests on the RUTF or the RUSF, ready-to-use therapeutic food, ready-to-use supplementary food, or the plumpy nuts for those who are, somehow acquainted to the system. Since 30 years now, this is the alpha and omega of the response. So peanuts everywhere. The thing is, I think there is a real scope for you guys, to help us doctors get alternatives to the plum peanut, locally produced alternatives. It saved a lot of lives. It was a moment in time where we were, more in a kind of let's do something now. But I think we learned so much, and from everything you were sharing today, we are no longer, close to discovering the local crops. We know what they are. We know what they do. What we need now is your help matching the efforts of the health scientists to find out the dosage, the compositions, and please propose to us alternatives. And once you do this, I'm sure there will be local producers interested to do, because we already have some. So instead of bringing peanuts from, I don't know, United States in order to process them in Ethiopia, let's use all these good crops and, you know, foods that exist. Instead of crossing the planet 3 times in planes and have issues to deliver, let's produce them where the needs are. And the closest it will be done, the most effective the response would be. So that's my homework for you guys. Sorry.
Thank you, Dana. It's a great opportunity and offer what you're putting on the table there. And I think there'll be a lot of people excited to take that on. That was brilliant. Okay, we have poor Felix Rembold, who's got the really challenging task of putting some comments together based on today. But before Felix takes over, just let me remind anybody who didn't have their question answered, the EU has promised to make all efforts they can to send you some replies by email. So Felix, are you there?
Thank you, Joanna. I'm there. It's a challenge, as you say, but it's also a great privilege to share some last reflections and comments. So, colleagues, let me say that when starting to work on this knowledge review, I had the feeling that there is already a tremendous amount of knowledge there and experiences, messages, lessons learned. But this feeling has only increased in the last 2 hours. There is so much already there. We really don't need to rebuild things from scratch and to reinvent. At the same time, it's not just the sum of knowledge we are interested in. We are interested in answers, right, to the important questions. And one of the most interesting and provocative questions today was the one about what is different in this round of support and enthusiasm for NUS. And my feeling is that this question has been answered already during the show by many different panelists and from different perspectives. So from policy to science to experiences on the ground. So this was really, really great to listen to and to hear and to learn. So today we have witnessed a tremendous amount of evidence on the potential of NUS for transforming food systems, reaching higher sustainability, higher levels of biodiversity, even equity. So this is all really impressive, and I think it's a tremendous treasure for policymakers to have all this now available in their hands. And I also think that events like today, where we have all the different partners from the different communities, NGOs, civil society, even private organizations I have seen here, farmers organizations. This adds really to the value of this knowledge, these discussions and seeing what comes out of it and learning from all of you. This is a tremendous participatory effort that gives us so much. So thank you very much for that. I'll also very quickly remember a few things we have heard and we have learned today many times. Each crop is specific and different NUS can perform differently in different contexts. So it's very hard to generalize. We have given some recommendations in the knowledge review, but remember that everything needs to be seen in the specific context with the help of local knowledge and for the very specific. Really, today I've seen a lot of positive energy and momentum. This was great and it was exciting. And I really call on all of you, on all the participants, to keep this momentum going, to come back to us, send us feedback, propose follow-up events, send any reactions you like, because this is really important to maintain and to continue. As a knowledge center of food and nutrition security, we will follow this up, but we will also try to use this format for related areas. For example, we are now working on a knowledge review on agroforestry and its impacts, mainly the socio-economic impacts. So with the success of this format and kind of discussion, we try to build on today and also extend that to other closely related areas. So please stay tuned, have a look from time to time at the Knowledge Center website and stay with us. Colleagues, I think the time has really come now to close this event, and I would like to express my deepest gratitude, first of all, to our wonderful moderator, Joanna. You have managed this in a unique and great way. Thank you very much. The panelists, to all of you, thanks for your intervention, for the perspectives shared, for the very important messages and lessons that you have given us. EC colleagues who helped GRC and other DGs, great to share this with you. And all the participants who were there connected today, many of you. It was great to have you there, to know you at least a bit better, and to share this time with you. Thank you very, very much again. I wish you a pleasant rest of the day, and I look forward to meet you again. Bye.
Brilliant. Thank you, Felix. Thank you, everybody. And let's work together to make sure these crops are neglected no more. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye to everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Keep moving, yeah.
Thank you and have a nice day.
Thanks a lot to everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.